Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to episode two of season two of Conversations That Matter. We're your hosts, Meenakshi Iyer and Priya. I am physically located in Virginia in the US, and Priya is joining us from Chennai in India. We are so happy to be here and look forward to hanging out with all of you today as we step into episode two of this of season two, being human in a digital world. I want to take a moment to welcome all of you. We are right now live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook, so you can catch us on any of these three channels. Hop in the chat and let us know where you're joining us from. And we hope that most of you caught episode one either live or via recording. We did that last Tuesday, July 25th. So we'd love to hear what stood out for you. Pop that in the chat, and then we'll pick that up as we go along. And by the way, happy August. We are in month 8 of 2023. And if this is the first time you are meeting us, my name is Meenakshi Iyer, and I'm the founder and principal of North Star Solutions and Services LLC, which is a boutique future work oriented coaching, training, and consulting practice. And we specialize in supporting mid level leaders, particularly technology leaders, women in tech, and folks like myself who speak English as an additional language in their people and change leadership journeys. And Priya, Ramesh, and I, we started Conversations That Matter last year. And our season one was about psychological safety at work. I've had the privilege of being trained by Priya. And so this is a wonderful opportunity for me to collaborate. And I'm thrilled to be here. And thank you so much, Priya, for doing this with me and for your time and wisdom here today.
Thank you, Meenakshi. Welcome, everyone. Very good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are. I see a couple of people on the chat. There's Kira from Iowa, Robin from Chicago, Carol from not sure where. A very good morning to all of you.
Carol Jean is here in Kentucky as well. She's a good friend. And we hung out at the North Star Cafe last week. And we were talking about the neurodivergent leader. So welcome, good morning and welcome everyone. And Kira is a Kocharya alum. So lovely to be here.
Okay.
Hey, Robin. Good morning to all of you. Oh, Carol Jean is in Alabama. Sorry.
Yes. Okay. So a very warm welcome to people we see on the chat and people we don't see but we think are there.
Yes.
And those who join us maybe a little later. An absolute pleasure to be having this conversation because these conversations matter to us. And somewhere along the way, as we started our collaboration, Meenakshi and I, we said we should create a space where we can have some important conversations that may or may not impact the way we operate in this world. So we started with psychological safety, and this time we're going to be talking about being human in a digital world. So I'm Priya Ramesh, a leadership coach, master certified from ICF and EMCC. And I'm co-founder of a leadership organization called Orenda. And a good part of the work that I do is around developing leaders' emotional intelligence, and their ability to be able to trust and work and collaborate with each other. And of course, as a coach, helping leaders be the best version of themselves. So here we go, this evening for me in India on being human in a digital world. So what we did last time was episode 1, which is with respect to personal spaces and relationships with ourselves. That was the context of our conversation last week. And some of the key things that came up in that discussion, which I'd like to share here, Meenakshi, for the group, is technology takes up as much space as you give it. I remember you saying that, Meenakshi, and it is really about us being intentional about how much space we want to give it in our lives. While you're busy showing up for others, how do you show up for yourself? So, how has the digital world encroached upon your personal space, time with yourself, and what has that done for you? Right? And how do we be present to the real time experiences of the moment, and not let that be stolen away by gadgets and what shall I say, the artifacts of a digital world.
Yeah, I love what you said there, Priya. Filling every gap with a gadget.
Yeah, yeah. So it was those moments of pause, reflection, being intentional, continuing to be empathetic, compassionate, and considerate to ourselves, listening to ourselves, being there for ourselves as a way to being human in the personal space, despite having to battle the digital onslaught, if I may call it. Today, we're going to be talking about a different space, which is workspace. So, how do we show up in workspaces? How do we build relationships in the workspace and continue to connect to us as humans, ourselves in a digital world? That's going to be the conversation for today. Meenakshi, anything that you want to bring from last time?
Uh, I think what I would add to that is the sort of approach we took, and that's going to continue on in this episode as well, Priya. When we talked about, we answered sort of five questions or five
Right.
aspects, if you will. So we talked about how has tech encroached, what's happening, what are the implications. And I actually took some notes. I printed, but it's on paper. And we looked at what's happening with how is tech influencing my relationship with myself. That was episode one, and we're going to look at workspace and colleagues and leaders and customers in this episode. But we kind of looked at what's tech doing, how are we behaving, what are the implications of that, and then we looked at, okay, what does it really mean to be human? And then we looked at, in the end, we shared our perspectives on what does it really take to retain that humanness, if you will, in a digital world, in a tech driven world. And I really liked how that sort of structure emerged, if you will. And I remember attending your session on structure and flow, and that came to mind just now as I was thinking about this. So, in our conversation flow, this is a structure that really emerged, and we liked the way it flowed, that we decided to use that for this episode as well. And I also loved how we have this sort of stacked Venn diagram, if you will. We started with self, and then we're expanding it to our workspace. And then episode three, we'll be looking at the ecosystems that we inhabit. So I liked that we started with self, and I know that you believe in that as well, that starting with self is the most important aspect in I mean, that's the most important relationship we have, and I believe that each of us is the most important person we'll ever lead. So I've enjoyed this, and I really like what has emerged so far, and I hope folks that are here and that will watch the recording will also see that.
So, Meenakshi, I know that you work in the technology space,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's a great place to start as to how has your workspace changed with the with technology, with what's it like to be working in a digital world?
Yeah, I could take up the whole episode, Priya. Well, I think I've kind of seen technology evolve My career in tech started when I was still in India, and at a time when software outsourcing was booming as an industry. So this was late 90s, early 2000s, just right after the Y2K boom. And I remember being part of the industry then, where in India, we were focused on primarily delivering software products and services to customers who were outside of India, and most often came from the Western world, English speaking world. And I do want to make a segue here is that whenever I hear, especially during the pandemic and post pandemic, when there is so much conversation around remote work and people struggling to do this and that, I just sit back and I'm very amused because anyone that comes from the software industry, especially who's been exposed to the outsourcing side of the house, will know that none of this is new. Folks that have worked in software development, we all know that this whole thing about working remote and working hybrid, etc., is at least 20, 25 years old, if not more. And at a time when technology, like you really didn't have video conferencing technology and things like that. So, we all used to sit around this gigantic conference call phone, and that's how work used to get done. And so for me to see how we have evolved from all of that to literally instantaneous connection with anyone, anywhere in the world, and with such high quality video and audio transmission, it's phenomenal. And I think that so a few things that this has made me realize is all technology is created by humans, and we create this to either enhance the human experience or create possibilities, create realities that didn't exist until a few years ago, right? We create new realities. And that's where we use technology. And I find it interesting that people that work in tech somehow, at least there is this misconception to a large extent, which is why I do the work that I do now, that the world of tech is far removed from the world of people. And I think we could not be farther from the truth, because the fundamental reason why we build technology is for other humans to enhance the overall human experience. So having been part of the tech world in different industries for the last 20, 25 years, this is what I've come away with, that if we go back to that sort of point of origin, if you will, of why we started building technology and internet-based technology primarily, everything starts with the need for connection, starts with the curiosity to know what else is going on in other parts of the world and things like that. So I think that the human element is fundamental to technology. So that's what's come up for me. And how my world has changed is that, well, North Star Solutions and Services is a virtual business. I work out of my home, but I have the privilege of working with clients from around the world. And I was intentional in doing it that way. So actually, August is birthday month for North Star, and I started North Star in 2019. It was way before the pandemic. I mean, it wasn't even on the horizon. Like, we didn't know what was going to happen in the next 6 months, and the world changed. But I always wanted to have a virtual business. And for me, it was about the flexibility that it offered. I could take it wherever I went. I could work with people from different parts of the world and just keep that going, because throughout my career, I have worked with virtual teams and multicultural teams and multilingual teams. So I wanted to sort of retain that part of my corporate life in what I did as an entrepreneur.
Lovely.
Yeah.
I can see how you've, two things that you're saying. One, it's not new.
Yes.
Two is it is meant to enhance the connections with people. And as you say that, I think we somewhere have lost the plot.
Yes, yeah? I love how you said that. Lost the plot. It's true.
Because we've sort of allowed this not just to enhance, but take over. In the sense that we might have lost ourselves and the way we connect with each other, if we are not attentive to it, if we are not intentional. And when I look at my space, workspace, Meenakshi, so I've always worked with people. My work has been always with people and connecting being a big word, and to the humane aspect. I'm a coach, right? So it's always about connecting beyond what you just see, to connect at a deeper level. But at the same time, technology has been like, it's been so fantastic that I'm now able to. Meenakshi and I know each other maybe for 3 years now, but we haven't met. But we're so happy to do a lot of work together, and we've managed that. And I'm sure many people around the world, around the globe, is doing that.
Yeah.
That we're able to meet people across cultures, across the globe, like never before.
Yes.
So huge opportunity to connect and to embrace the humaneness in each of us. And I remember how much we were able to support people going through the pandemic
Yes.
crisis.
Yes.
Offer our expertise in some ways, offer space for people to speak, and all this was possible because of the digital world.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that's fantastic. But like I said, we shouldn't lose the plot. And therefore, it brings me to check in. If there is an audience here who wants to add to the comment section, please do. What about work relationship, right? What has changed in the way we relate to people at workspace? For one, it's, work from home has taken over, so there is a little more of you just being with yourself. We've lost a little bit of these water cooler moments where we could just walk up and talk and have a chat informal. uh, every relationship, every conversation needs to be scheduled in the calendar,
Yes.
and so when it's scheduled, we are there just for that. I'm not sure how many people do it, but won't it be interesting to have a calendar invite and a space for just nothing, just to meet?
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. As you shared that, Priya, I was reminded of something that my team and I did. This was a few years ago. This would have been at least 5 or 6 years ago. Um, so my at the time I was located here in Virginia in the U.S. And my team was like I think 10 or 12 people, and half of them were in India, and then there were I think 1 or 2 people in the same office that I used to be in here in Virginia, and then there were 2 or 3 people in other time zones in the US. That's how we were split across 3 different time zones. And we I think it was Christmas that year, and I decided that we needed to do something to celebrate with the team, and the distance was not an issue. So we were able to figure out. One of our executive leaders was traveling to the India office, so we were able to send some stuff to for our team in India, and I was able to ship the rest locally here in the US. And then we all got together. Um, it was evening in India, of course, and it was early morning our time here in the US. And those of us that did celebrate Christmas, and we all so basically we did like coffee and cookies in our PJs. So those of us who could wear our PJs, like myself, because we were working from home and it was early morning our time, and we all sat around our respective Christmas trees, if you will, and we shared. And all that we did was we shared what we did during that time of the year. What were our family's customs and traditions, regardless of whether you celebrated Christmas or not. If you didn't celebrate, then what did you do during the holiday? And the team leader there in India was able to support us and make sure all the stuff that we sent out as gifts, and we basically unwrapped our gifts under the tree. That's what we did. We recreated that via a Zoom meeting, and that's a memory And I go back to that, like today, just now I was able to recall it because something you said, it just triggered that for me. And that sense of happiness around that remains. And to me, retaining our human humanness, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
um, technology can enable that and help us enhance that. And it really, your physical location is immaterial,
Mm.
but what it needs is that human intention to do
Yes.
something like this, right? So
Yeah.
there were many people involved in this Operation Coffee and Cookies to make it happen. A lot of planning went into it, but it was just absolutely worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it sounds fun even just listening to it, to you sharing. And there's something very interesting that Kira has put on the comments, right?
Yeah.
It's amazing, which is so true.
Yes.
You could be in the presence of people and still be disconnected or
Yes.
still not have an interaction.
Absolutely.
Um, and being in the office is almost like working remotely, sure.
Yes.
That has changed, right? I mean, it was not how it used to be.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Kira. And Carol Jean writes, tech has given me deeper and farther reaching connections. My coaching partner and co author have never met in person. And she continues to say, we've worked together for almost 3 years now. Yes, I
Mm,
totally can relate to that, Carol Jean.
mm.
Uh, and Kira, your comment made me. I saw this one line post on LinkedIn yesterday that said, I landed a job at Zoom. I'm paraphrasing, Zoom, like the company Zoom, and I have to work in office. Your comment reminded me of that.
So, what has been the impact of um, you know being in the digital world? What impact has it had on relationships? You think in
Um,
workplace?
I think that the entire, and if we look at it just from a employee-employer relationship, if we take that,
Hmm.
I think tech has affected, and the digital world has affected every single touch point
Hmm.
in that employee-employer life cycle, if you will, relationship
Mm-hmm.
life cycle.
Hmm.
And as we were talking earlier, when we were prepping for this conversation, the different aspects, starting from recruitment, the experience
Yes.
during recruitment, to interviewing, to onboarding, to actually doing your work, and then towards the end of the life cycle, the exit process, involuntary or involuntary, right? This has been like over the past few months, we've seen year actually, we've seen so many layoffs, for example, particularly in the tech industry. So each touch point has been sort of redefined, if you will. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
like, for example, when you look at recruitment, your resumes have to be ATS friendly. Like, that's a term, application tracking system.
Hmm.
And so the content, it has to be sort of like keyword heavy. It has to be in a certain format. Otherwise, the system will not recognize it because it's read by a machine, an algorithm, before it's read by any human, right? So, and on the flip side, if you look at it from a recruiter's perspective, for every position, if they get hundreds of resumes, it's humanly impossible to review each one of them.
Hmm.
And there are stats that say that a recruiter has probably 3 to 6 seconds to look at a resume. That's all that it gets, the time span that it gets, right? So then you get into the interview process. And I remember several, again, this technology was new at the time, and this goes back to 2014, so a few years ago. um, I had to, my first round of interview was scheduled, but it was literally with a machine. Like, there was no
Hmm.
human at the other end. And the
Hmm.
technology was that the hiring manager had recorded 3 or 4 questions in their own voice. So that part was human. It was recorded into the system,
Ah.
and I had to access that question, speak my response,
Oh.
and it'll get recorded. And I can't remember now if I had the opportunity to redo that, but that's how that first round of interview was. So it was the weirdest thing I had ever done during
Absolutely.
recruitment. And it was, quite a few years ago. And I didn't know about, so I was introduced to that technology during that interview process.
And
But
sorry to
no, no,
interrupt.
go ahead.
So this reminds me of somebody who shared an instance where he was recruiting somebody for his team,
Uh huh.
and it was over. You could see the person, you could have a conversation, yet you couldn't really feel the pulse of it. So they thought he was a right fit, and he was hired, he was onboarded, given the training, and all of that happened, but somewhere he wasn't delivering, right? And when they were not able to figure out what was wrong, and it so happened by which time that there was an opportunity for them to have a one-on-one conversation, and it was a closed door conversation between the team manager and the person who was recruited.
And that was in
And
person, that
in
conversation.
person, that conversation was in person, and he said it was simply amazing the kind of things that we spoke about, and I really got to know this person, and I realized he doesn't fit this role at all. So it's not that he's not performing. I've taken the wrong person, right? My
Yeah.
decision, my decision was wrong, and based on a few things that I could only see so much of on screen. So my decision was simply based on, when I'm talking about the human side of it,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes.
You have the content, you have the CV, the biodata, it's got all the capability. But it's not just capability these days, right? There's a
Yes.
lot of weightage in how you come across and how you communicate. And I think all of that, if you're not mindful, can get lost in this uh, total reliance on technology for such things. So it
Yeah.
just reminded me of your onboarding experience.
Yeah. And what you said just now, Priya, I'm going to think and talk probably in parallel. So I feel like all these years, especially the past decade, and particularly the last couple of years, technology has evolved and it has dramatically changed our lives and how we interact with ourselves, with each other, all of that, right? And I think that we have been forced to learn how to interact with machines and bots and technology in such a hurry that we have somehow forgotten how to be human in that process.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And now that AI is in our homes, literally, like, I mean, I don't think there's a single home without an Alexa or a Google Echo or whatever, or your Apple Siri on your phones. Um, we the way forward for us is to really excel at those human aspects which have been sidelined for the past
Right.
decade or so. And I feel like that's such an interesting inflection point for us,
Yes.
right?
Beautiful, because it's really beautiful what you said. I think this is a point for us to step back, pause, and look at it,
Yes.
because we were too busy adapting, being flexible, which is absolutely brilliant because we were on top of things.
Yes.
And I'm saying this because pandemic has really brought forth the power of technology and using technology in ways we never thought of, uh, to connect, right? Specifically to connect, and how we work at our workspaces. How do we connect with our workspaces? All of that, it is just highlighted. But I think this is an inflection point, and this is the time to just pause and look back and say, how do we not go through a new default way of functioning and really reinvent and reconnect with our human side so they become complementary?
Yes. Yes.
For example, if somebody is leaving the organization, right? What would it take for us to have a conversation? And it could be using technology, that conversation, but giving an opportunity to have a human interaction and not let that just be a mail. Just sending out a mail versus, can I have 5 minutes of your time and we speak through this? It allows people to process their emotions, their thoughts, say a few things. And as an organization, you have the opportunity to make that, and what shall I say, a little more easy and comfortable exit from the organization.
Yes, yes.
So, do we still value those emotions and the humanness of the other?
Yeah.
And to do that, what do we need to do, if you're looking at it from, if I was representing the organization, really?
What that brought up for me is that we have somehow developed a lot of patience and genuine curiosity when it comes to technology. So let me elaborate on that. Like your apps like Facebook or even LinkedIn, any app that you have on your phone, they these tech and they're at the end of the day they're a technology platform and they push out updates to their platform on a regular basis. You don't have a choice. You have to take those updates. Even your phone gets updated.
Yes,
And
yes.
you have to take those software updates in order to be able to use the phone seamlessly and all that, right? And we just do it.
Yeah.
We don't question that, right? And you'll find that the icons have moved or the functionality has changed, but we adapt to that very quickly, very
Yeah.
easily, without complaint.
Right.
Not all the time, but yes, more often than not. It just struck me as you were talking about like the exit interview, having a in person or a personal conversation, whether
Yes.
in person or via technology. Um, we How would it be and how might it be if we were able to i- interact with another human with the same level of empathy and genuine curiosity that we seem to have figured out how to do with tech?
Mm, mm, mm.
We ask very few questions and then we figure out a way to continue to interact with that platform or that technology, whatever it may be. But we don't seem to feel that same level of need, if you will, to extend that benefit of the doubt to other human beings. That's what struck me when you said that.
Yeah. I just want to share an experience I've had with one of the cab um, vendors, if I may call it, yeah, without going into the name of the organization. I book a cab, and at the end of the ride, I've paid the money for it via cash. I've got a receipt for it. Somewhere after about 15 days, which is the end of the month, I get another bill from the same organization saying you are due to make the payment. If you don't make the payment within a week, you'll be charged a fine, a penalty. So this came via mail. And I figured that somewhere I had pressed a postpaid option, which means to say that this mail, I need not have paid the cab driver then, because the invoice would anyway come at the end of it. So that was my fault. Yeah. So I take responsibility for that. But to be able to communicate this with the vendor, it took me 50 mails.
Five
It was
zero?
50.
Oh my
And,
God.
it's 7 days. So I'm saying, hey, I've already paid. Then they said, no, payment overdue or due. Okay. Then I send back and say, here's the bill, I've paid. So then he says, and I'm saying he or she, because even the people who were responding had a name, but each time it was somebody else.
Yes.
It wasn't the same person.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And I'm sure the organization sees benefit in that. But I found it so hard to explain my situation.
Mm.
And I'm saying, there's a bill from you saying this has been paid, but because the system says postpaid, it still comes up.
Mm.
So after 50 mails back and forth, I was tired. I said,
I
can
don't blame you.
I said, can I speak to somebody? And when I
Yeah.
say speak, whether it's phone or can I just speak to another human being on the other end? I just want to explain my situation, right? There was nothing that came. And because it wasn't sorted, I didn't want to make the payment. I thought I could sort this out. And then the deadline had crossed. And then now they tell me that you've passed the deadline, so you've got to pay penalty.
So they slapped a fine on top of a double payment as well. Oh God.
Right. So if I had an opportunity to speak to somebody, double click on speak to a human being, who could take that 1 minute? And
Yes.
this is related to the customer care. So me as a customer,
Yes.
so
Yes.
as an organization, if I was looking at my customer, if my customer is important, my relationship with my customer is important, I think it's important to make space for some conversations. I'm not saying every time speak, but
Yes.
find some ways in which you can have a conversation which can, I think it would make me a more loyal customer
Yes.
to this vendor. Now I'm, at 1 arm distance. I said, okay, if I don't get any other, I'll take you.
Mm.
So it has changed my experience,
Yeah.
right? and
Yeah.
and I think that has changed the work relationships, customer client relationship, I mean
Yes.
customer vendor relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. You bring up a very valid point. So there's two things from my own experience in the world of tech as somebody who worked in the industry and what I see now as a coach.
Mm.
Um, so what you said about your experience as a customer with a tech company, because at the end of the day they're all tech companies, right? They have a
Right.
platform that they're running. Um, so that is another aspect of workplace relationships. So we talked
Mm.
about employee employer, and now we're talking about organization and a customer. And this is where being person centered, being human
Mm.
centered in how you design your systems and your flows, your
Yes.
workflows, your ways of working is so
Right.
important. Exactly like
Absolutely.
you said, right? Like when you sent an email that triggered their ticketing system in the back end, and there'll be a reference number, blah blah blah, and somebody works the queue. That's
Yeah.
how that works, and that's why you never get the same person the
Right.
second time, right? And you already were empathetic in saying, I'm sure the organization sees value in running it that way, but you as a customer, you are not getting the experience that
Yeah.
you need. So it's really, there is so much of opportunity there for companies to really look at, especially the ones that are end, end consumer or customer facing, to think
Mm.
about how they build their technology based systems,
Absolutely.
and how human responsive is it.
Right.
And we lose sight of that sometimes
Mm.
when we are just focused only on the efficiency piece of it, of things.
Right.
And we don't know exactly what we're measuring, and sometimes we end up measuring the wrong thing, and
Mm.
and this is the result that we get.
Mm.
um, and the other thing that popped up for me as you said that, and we had talked about this in the green room, is this heavy reliance on digital ways of communication, like banking. And I know we are going to get into that in the next episode when we talk about ecosystems, but shopping, banking, car, I mean, ride hailing services, all of that. It's really created this new um, type of literacy and illiteracy, if you will, digital literacy and
Mm.
digital
Mm.
illiteracy.
Mm.
And people who are able to get it and who are intrinsically motivated to learn this new form of communication, they're the ones who are successful, because there's nobody in any of these ecosystems who are taking the time to assist people who are still on the learning curve,
Absolutely.
right?
Mm.
So you either come with it or sorry, you got to figure out your own way in this
Absolutely.
labyrinth, right?
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
the other piece that came up for me. So in this with this experience, and I want to shift gears slightly because that was another thing that you had mentioned when we were planning for this is what you are seeing in in a lot of your facilitative work that you're doing with teams and organizations. How is the use of technology or digital forms of communication, etc. What's that doing to organizations and teams? What are you seeing?
So I'll talk about a recent experience I've had with a group of about 8 to 9 senior leaders, and this was a group that brought together leaders from different departments, and they were forming a core team to work on a specific task. They had their functional responsibilities, but this was a sort of like a SEAL team, if you may call it, right? They came together for a particular project. And interestingly, the team had people of varying levels in the organization. So somebody who's just joined, maybe 2 years experience, somebody who's been there from the time it was founded, and quite a bit like that. So it was a mixed bag. And the person who had just joined 2 years, he's been into the organization, he said, "This has been the most rewarding one day that I've spent in the 2 years I was in this organization. Because now I have a face to the people I'm seeing and I'm talking to. And just that connect, just being together, exchanging ideas, views, and going through this workshop, I know that next time I send a mail to this person, I'll get a response that is more specific and connected to me as a person. It's not one of those, there's a mail, there's a response, but it's not really to the person, it's more to the task. Okay, do this, this,
Yes.
this, and it gets solved. But I have now a name and a face, and I know for sure that if I send this person a mail 2 months from now, the response, the way he responds is going to be very different.
Yes. Yes.
And for me, that was extremely powerful. Of course, there was the liberty of being in person. But even during a virtual facilitation, right, on screen, you have little boxes like you and I now, different people. A lot of them are, they're just overscheduled. Like somebody said, right? 80% of HR professionals are
Yeah.
experiencing burnout. It's like you've got to be there on screen all the time, and sometimes that can create burnout. And when I say on screen, they're not on screen, they're present on the call, but there's
Yes.
no audio and there's no video. So you really don't know who you're engaging with. You don't know if what you're saying is reaching anyone or not. So some of the things that we've done, Meenakshi, in the work with virtual groups is to insist on everybody coming on screen. If nothing, there is some time you can call out, "Hey, I see you're very quiet. What's happening? What's going on for you?" So there is greater engagement. And what I'm saying is there's a possibility and opportunity for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, uh, to be connected at a more human level than just at a task level. And even in the virtual world, it's possible. Can we dip into that?
Yeah. That is $1 million question. Can we dip into that? Uh, and a few things popped up for me as you shared that, Priya, especially around uh, presence, being on
Mhm.
video, and in virtual environments. There's been a lot of conversation around that, and I know Carol Jean here. She and I have talked a little bit about this as well. Um, Being on camera all the time can also be exhausting because that it uses a different uh, faculties of your brain to be
Mhm.
present and be on
Yes,
camera. It's very different from. I
yes,
know you know this, right? When you're facilitating virtually versus facilitating in person, in my
absolutely.
experience, the energy consumption is varied. It
Yeah.
varies. Yeah. So people who are neurodistinct, neurodivergent, they find it excruciatingly painful to be on camera
To
all the
be honest,
time, and
absolutely.
because that's not how they show up as being
Mm,
present, right?
mm,
And so,
mm.
from an inclusion standpoint, it becomes challenging for people. Some people may not have the space; they may live in a one-bedroom apartment, and
Right.
so they may not. And all of this came up during the pandemic, and I know that that was a point of discussion in and of itself. But I think the what struck me is, again, to me it goes back to the intent.
Mm,
If we start with that intent of creating connection, being genuine in wanting to connect with others, there is so much that we can do
right.
with what we have. And I think that we struggle to go back to what that intention is, because we're so used to having all these tools around us, right? Like,
Right.
it started
Right.
with being in person, and then being on little boxes on screens, to, okay, now I don't have video either. So it's challenging.
Mm,
uh, I see some comments here. So Carol Jean says, finding and understanding our unique needs and preferences
right.
is critical to showing up in the best way for each person. How we honor that as the other person is vital. Yeah, thank you for that, Carol Jean.
And what that really means is we've got to take that time to connect.
Yes, yes,
So, how do you know where they're coming from? How do you understand their context? And that's what human beings can do, right? We can
yes,
sense and respond. I know
absolutely.
sense and respond is your favorite phrase, and I'm borrowing Meenakshi big time. It's really about sensing and responding. It's a
Yeah,
very innate human quality. Can we leverage more of that?
yes.
Uh, Being empathetic, can we be more of that? So empathy, we also spoke about this, Meenakshi.
Last time, yeah.
Yeah. And do you want to share what?
No, no, no. Go ahead.
Yeah. So it was about, as an employee in an organization, I keep wanting my leader to be empathetic, understand my context, my ways of working, sense and respond to me. Um, but we can't operate from a state of entitlement, saying,
Yep.
you do it for me. But what about me doing it for him? I mean, can we also understand what it takes for the leader? And can we bring our human quality there, our ability to be empathetic to our leaders, and how they're struggling with um, all of this, different struggles perhaps, but can we be empathetic to that? And that's being human.
Absolutely. And that's why
Yes,
I think I believe that empathy is a two-way street.
absolutely.
And in within organizational settings, I find, and on platforms like LinkedIn, for example, I find that leaders and organizations tend to be the ones to be spoken to. Like, everybody's busy lecturing leaders, and I've been guilty of that too, in some of my messaging, right? But what does each of us bring to the table? We each have responsibilities, and we each have expectations, and then I think when there's a mismatch between that, is cause of a lot of the angst that we experience. And uh, the earlier on, when you talked about being present, being on camera, and things like that, when we were chatting about that, that led me to think about the whole idea of presenteeism.
Mm,
Uh, so I think that also is a big challenge, because for leaders, it's learning a new skill of how to lead people who they can't physically see.
right.
Again, this is not new. Multinational organizations with matrix organizational structures, you have leaders on a totally different geography and time zone, and their teams work in a totally different time zone and geography. So this is not new, but with the advances in technology, there we have to figure out newer rules of engagement
Mm,
around
mm,
that. So when it comes to uh, people feeling like they have to show that they are working, in addition to generating the results or the outcomes, they have to somehow create that visibility, if you will, and that leads to a lot of presenteeism. And then when working remotely, folks feel the pressure to do more of it. So people are working longer, answering emails at all odd hours, and being the first one to respond to an email somehow, that seems to be it. And it's just leading us all to this unsustainable pace of work, and no wonder burnout is so high.
Absolutely.
So to me, as I start thinking about the implications of our behaviors, the need to be always on, the need to constantly check email, and it's again biting into our time, our personal time with our family, and all of that. So that's one piece, and on the flip side, and I know that this is true at least for uh, women and other underserved groups. I've had some of these conversations myself. Being seen at work, visibility. Uh, there's so much of a physical aspect attached to visibility that in remote and hybrid settings, people struggle to figure out, okay, how do I get noticed?
Right.
How do I network within the organization? How do I build my peer networks? That becomes a challenge because, like you said, like we do not have the luxury of those water cooler chats or meeting before the meeting and meeting after the meeting, all those informal conversations, those hallway conversations, those are all lost because they don't really, we have to figure out how to recreate them in the virtual space or hybrid space. But in the absence of those, maintaining your visibility at work, which is so important when it comes to career progression, that's an additional challenge. So I think those are some change or some opportunities for us to figure out newer rules of engagement.
Right. And we can't use the rules of engagement that we used earlier. It will
Yes,
have to be a deliberate, conscious recreation of that.
absolutely, absolutely. You bring up a great point, and this is something I have struggled with, and the groups that I work with, I try to highlight this is that we try to, just because we've gone virtual, we still want to do the same things that we did in person,
Yes, yes.
right? And then it's like round ball, square peg, and we're trying to force fit those same rules of engagement in a different environment instead of pausing, like you said, pausing to think about, okay, this is a totally new environment, totally different geography.
Yeah.
Uh, we don't drive on the right, we drive on the left. So how are we going to do this? So I think that's another huge opportunity. Uh, oh, I'm seeing some comments here. Carol Jean, thank you. Thank you so much for your time. And I hope you're able to catch us, the rest of it, on replay. And I want to take this moment to thank everyone that has been watching us live. Share your thoughts. What is coming up for you as you've heard Priya and I talk about being human in a digital world in the professional spaces? And also want to take a moment to remind everyone that if you've just joined us, welcome. Priya and I have been talking about, so we are on episode 2 of this 3-part conversation series, season 2 of Conversations That Matter, being human in a digital world. And last week we focused on our relationship with ourselves, and today we are focusing on our relationships at work. And how has the world of tech, the digital world that we live in, how has that influenced that, and how is it shaping and reshaping our behaviors? And what does it really mean to be human in this new context? So that's what we've been chatting about. We have another sort of 15-20 minutes to go in this episode. So if you've just now joined us, welcome. We are live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. Pop in the chat where you're joining us from, and what would you like to hear more about in today's conversation? So keep the chat rolling, and if you have questions, pop that in as well. So we actually, speaking of questions, Kira has a question. Do you see any organizations changing the rules of engagement successfully in a virtual workplace? What are they doing? Priya, do you want to take that? I'll follow you.
Yeah, I was just thinking with the organizations that I'm working, I see a lot of organizations going back to pre-pandemic ways of engagement. And I'm not sure whether, and I see a lot of pull and push around that. So I'm not sure if we can go back to those ways of engagement. I think we'll have to accept this new reality. And for example, one of the organizations that I was working with, and we found that the easiest example is, the ways of working itself, which is hybrid versus work from home, back to office, those challenges.
Yeah.
Um, Many of them have allowed independent teams to work out their rules of engagement. And this may not be what the organization sets out, but team wise, right? Saying that this is how we want to stay connected. This is how we want to create engagement. This is, for example, there was an organization which created listening circles. And it was an open session where anyone in the organization could just come and talk about stuff which is maybe challenging, which is exciting. It's an open and free space. There were others, what has changed? Kira, interesting question. It's also brought another thought to my mind is I see leaders questioning what really motivates people at work. Because there was a time where we were looking at just monetary benefit, just being in the physical space as two key motivators. But now leaders are forced to look at what else motivates this person so they can retain, because attrition is one of the biggest challenges organizations are facing right now,
Yeah.
which clearly is an indication that engagement levels are not as high as it should be.
Yep. Yep.
Or it could be, right? So I remember having this conversation with a very senior leader who said, I don't know, I never bothered to check what really excites them about coming to work every day. So they have now, having realized that in one of the coaching conversations, he's now working out a plan to say, okay, it could be a survey, it could be individual conversations, finding out a way in which I can connect and say, hey, what excites you? And I think that would give a lot of data about how we should formulate new rules of engagement. Kira, thanks for that very thought-provoking question.
Yeah. Yeah. And you raised so many valid points, Priya. It's around what is it? The employee-employer relationship has changed so much,
Yes.
and what was important to my parents' generation is not as important to me, and is not as important to, perhaps not even on the radar for the generation that follows me. And so, and this is also a time in our modern history that up to 4 generations of people are working together, and that had not been the case until a few years ago, because people, we the human race is living longer, and so people are working longer, and that's why we have this multi-generational workforce at play, and up to 4 different generations are working together. This also ties back to the earlier point we had made about digital natives, digital literates, and not. So, are you a digital native, or have you acquired digital fluency? And organizations are also looking at how can they help their leaders become digitally fluent. so
Right.
that they can better support uh, the next generation of folks that are coming in.
Mm-hmm.
I'm seeing a comment from Kira. Yeah, yeah. That's true too, right? Each of us, COVID is like a big time marker in our
Mm.
lives, and it has really made us evaluate and reevaluate everything. So yes, even within the same generation, even within the same person, those motivators can shift. I
Yeah.
wanted to offer a resource here. So this is Gallup has published its State of the Workplace report, and you can download that. If you go to gallup.com, you can download that. And they had a series of webinars. I attended a few of those, and they called out certain things like the level of stress, level of anger, how trusting our employees of their companies, and so on and so forth. So there are lots of measures that they've studied around the world, and they've studied it in many countries in the world. And so that's a resource that you might want to look at as well to get a better understanding. Um, so, as we begin to wrap up our conversation for today, Priya, what in your mind, what according to you, in the context of the workplace, what can we do to retain our humanness? What does being human look like?
So, what also came up for me, I mean, actually, I will answer that question, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
there was a residue from something else that we spoke about. This need for speed.
Oh, yes.
Everything yesterday, right? And what happens because of that is that element of tolerance, and that's being human, right? It's a human quality. Tolerance for whether it's diversity, whether it is speed, whether it is space, um, I think is shrinking. And if we are not mindful, I think we will forget to take people along. You may have the greatest technology, policy, structures in place, but we cannot forget the human element that people run this. And if we are not able to take people along, and to take people along, because as humans we are at varying levels, our motivations are different, our ability to learn is different. So if we don't build that tolerance, uh, we are just racing and we'll turn around and look, there might not be too many people following you.
Yes, yes. Priya, I remember when we did this was I think about 2 years ago when you came on my show Exploring Intersections, and you talked about the head and heart of leadership,
Hmm.
and you had shared this nugget. I think you had read it somewhere, I can't remember. You had said trust enables speed.
Yes. This is offered by Stephen Covey in one
Ah,
of the videos, and he says, if you want work done fast, start building trust,
yep, yep.
because trust creates speed.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you were saying, there's a need for speed, and to build trust, to earn it, to create it, takes time.
Yes.
And that's like, it feels so antipodal to each other. Right? But if you invest all that time up front as individuals, as employees, as leaders, to be show up as trustworthy, say what you do and do what you say, if you take the time to build that,
Hmm.
that that leads to trust, and then you're on to something after that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it ties back to that example I gave of a gentleman who was recruited during COVID times, right? He's been 2 years in the organization.
Yep.
In that, of course, it was a physical meeting. But even if it wasn't physical, if he had spent some time, both parties had spent some time to just get to know each other, understand how people work, because there was when we started that program, there was a lot of people were sitting on the fence saying, can I say this? Can I not say this? How will this person respond? because they can't see the body language. They don't get any cues.
Correct.
And if this person had taken the trouble to, have those interactions, perhaps he would have already created some level of trust.
Yeah.
But after that workshop, it was possible, like I said, for him to just ask for something and he would get a response, yes or no, whichever way. But from a sense and response space,
Yes.
because there's trust that's built.
Yes. Yes. So true.
So, creating trust, tolerance, empathy, compassion, all flexibility, all very human qualities. And the point I want to make, and I want to make to the group that's listening, is it's possible we still have a choice to bring that forth in our workplaces, to build relationships based on this, beyond, while using technology to enhance it.
Yeah. Yeah. How beautifully said. Yeah. We still have the choice.
Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely.
And it's a conscious effort, right? It's like we spoke in episode 1, it's very intentional.
Yes.
It's so easy for me to respond to an email in just 2 lines. But you know what I do? I just hold on. And then I respond to what I've heard as a person, from a person-centric point,
Yes.
and then give my response. And I think just making that little bit of 1 or 2 seconds for the other person, to include that other person into my world before I respond, makes conversations more meaningful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's such a nuance you brought up. Responding to an email, not thinking about it as an email, but really taking the time to literally look at the person who sent that email. And that shift in our, literally a shift in visual. Like I'm responding
Yeah,
to this email versus I'm responding to Priya,
absolutely.
right?
Nicely put.
Yeah. Wow. That's one of my top takeaways from our conversation today.
Yeah.
You
There's a
definitely know how
human
to
behind.
save the best for the last.
And that's the connection that we build, right, Meenakshi?
Yeah.
It isn't planned. And I
Right.
think that's where possibilities, because there is a connection.
Yes.
And like I said, this is the invitation to everyone that there is possibility, even in a few minutes conversation, to connect first, so we can sense and respond. And you know we can we can be intentional about the relationships and create that workspace that works best for us,
Yes.
so we
Yes.
can do our best at work. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, and I was going back to our notes, and I loved again the play of structure and flow and everything that we wanted to talk about. We've hit that in one way or another, and that's just fabulous. Um, yeah. Um, a couple of thoughts from me. I wanted to offer a couple of tangible points, for folks that are individual contributors and or leaders. One thing that I tell folks that I have worked with and or I serve as a coach to is that you have to engage with your career actively. And a lot of us tend to wait for, and I think I'm seeing that shift generationally. The younger generation coming in, they take much greater ownership of their career. I'm seeing that. Um, and sometimes I struggle with responding to that. But I think that if we really engage with our career actively and not just wait for things to happen to us and we make them happen, that shift, what does that mean? What does that look like? Doesn't matter what kind of onboarding or what kind of recruitment experience you had, was if it was all technology based or if it was a mix of human and technology, it doesn't matter. I think going in, really looking to build those relationships first, exactly what you said, Priya. taking the time to understand what are the, I don't know, 3 to 5 people that you are going to work with most often. Whenever I've interviewed, I have asked those questions during my interview to say, hey, what are the, who are the internal customers for this role? And and when I'm onboarded, those are the people I try to meet first. Right? Who are my internal customers, and who are the people that this role in my capacity is going to engage with the most. And I remember working at a company where it was the hiring manager's responsibility to set up those nudges for the new hire to say, hey, I think you should meet these 5 people. And there was the tech was built that way. So the
How
new hire
beautiful.
would get that email from the hiring manager saying, hey, set up in the first week, set up meetings with these people. I thought that was fantastic. And we all know that career, I believe that our careers are a team sport. As much as our immediate supervisor, manager, leader has the greatest influence on it, but there are a lot of other people involved in helping you be successful.
Right.
And your peer network within your organization is one that we oftentimes underestimate the value of. So when you're onboarding, and as you were talking about this gentleman who onboarded during COVID and then was seeing people for the first time after 2 years, I'm seeing a missed opportunity for that person to have, I don't know, maybe they did, we don't know what kind of response they got, all of that, but there is that opportunity for each of us to take control of how we use technology that's available to us to build those human connections.
Yeah.
And what do we do? Do we take that first step to get out there? And I also want to bring the other tactical point. You had mentioned this earlier on, is to, I call them office hours. Like you set up time on your calendar, let your team know that you're going to be online and they can pop in and out. It's just like a physical office. And sometimes nobody would show up, and that's totally fine. I'm always prepared to do my work, right? So these are some creative ways in which we can um, leverage technology to deepen
Yeah.
our human relationships, and not,
Beautiful.
it's going to be up to us, right? Whether we use it as an excuse or an enabler. We have that choice to do that. So this is my
Leverage
uh,
technology to deepen relationships. I think that's fantastic.
I'm going to type that
That's
out.
really what we are saying, right? That
Yes.
is what we are saying. We're not saying it's polarized. We're saying how do
Yes.
we continue to be human in a digital world where there are lots of tools available, but how do we leverage it to deepen human relationships?
Yeah.
And we can't take it for granted. We just
Absolutely.
cannot take these relationships for granted. Earlier, it used to happen because
Yeah.
we had those whatever informal meetings or corridor conversations. But this time around, I think if we are not mindful, um,
Yes.
we may lose the ability to. I mean, the ability is there, but we lose the opportunity, I would say,
Yes.
to
Yes.
connect.
Yes. Absolutely.
Nice.
Wow. This has been fantastic. And
Absolutely.
yeah, I can't believe it's been an hour and 15 minutes. So thank you all for being on this journey with us. And we want to thank everyone that will watch the replay. We love to hear your questions and comments. It was great to have this engagement today in the live conversation. So thank you, everyone that joined us live, for your time. And join us back next Tuesday, the 8th of August, when we step into the final episode of Being Human in a Digital World. I said it right this time. Last time, like, you'll see what I mean when you watch episode 1. And so episode 3, we're going to talk about what how has the digital world influenced our relationships, our relationship with the ecosystems that we inhabit. And so we're taking it another level, wider, if you will, as we continue this conversation. Thank you, Kira. It's lovely
Thank
to hang
you.
out with you and Carol
Yes.
Jean and Robin. And I'm sure I'll go back and check in all the comments that we missed because that's what happened last time. So thank you all for being here. And this is Priya and I saying bye for now. And we will see you back here next week,
Yes.
next Tuesday, August 8th. And again, we'll be live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. So take
Thank
care.
you, everyone.
Yeah,
Take care.
take care and be well. Bye for now.
Bye bye. Thank you, Meenakshi.